And honestly, I'm really lost them, so we're pretty popular.
How do we get the URL?
Invite or share?
That's for Akira. So what's her? I'm gonna send it to you because I don't know what her thing is. You do this?
Yeah, Jay's the one
What's that?
trying to make as big as possible.
Oh, creepy. So it's there.
I think on the transformers documentation, it's which I think my desktop is not good.
General?
You can make the and so I think my what about share?
It's live. It's working. It's blasting to YouTube. Open the link. See if it works. Oh my. Yeah, that's me just walking away there. I'll come back on frame. What's the delay?
3 seconds.
Ooh, it's longer than that. It's pretty long.
11 seconds. I did. I told you we started like 20 Yeah. The other person is supposed to present. Yeah.
Did you want the tokens back here?
Do you have them? Just bring them. Back in on that way. Yes, I did. Yeah. Did you go about it?
Just a second. YouTube.
Yeah, the way that I was talking about, you have to actually have
Just that song because it's good. No, Everybody's. Oh, I saw the poster. The only reason I know what it is because I saw the two guys on a poster. That's my extent of my knowledge of Union Twin. Should we have Akira on? She's sitting right there. Should we just do it? This was you. Did it feel weird? Were you anxious to get started when you were that little square?
Yeah. I guess. I was just nervous.
Hey.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
I know that was abrupt probably. I don't know what you were seeing or whatever, but I know it's weird for you. You're in a room or something. There's a whole, room of people here. Everybody yell. Woo! That's a solid woo. Woo
That's
for
a good
you.
woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, some good
I
wooing
agree.
going on.
I'm going to remove myself from this stream, and I guess you can just it's very casual. We're just sitting around. So please enlighten us with, what are you going to talk about?
Sweet. I'm going to talk about JSON Web Tokens.
Oh, it's like the Auth thing?
Yeah, like all that good Auth stuff.
Better than cookies, they say.
That's
right.
what they say. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. How does technology work? All right. Oh, that is not how technology works. Hang on one second. So for what it's worth, I can't hear anything that you guys are saying. So if someone has a question,
I'll pop in if there's a question or something.
Okay.
But yeah, I know the lack of audible feedback is weird, but just roll with it. You're all right.
Cool. I mean, hey, we're good. We're good here. All right. Okay. I hope you can all see my screen. So otherwise, this is going to be a really strange presentation. Alrighty, so let's see here. Over this way. All right, welcome. Thanks for coming to my talk. It's good to be back, even though I can't see anyone. I'm just gonna imagine all of you are like, "Wow, Akira's back! This is so exciting!" And if not, well then I can't tell the difference anyway. So my name's Akira. I'm gonna talk to you a bit about JOTs or JSON Web Tokens. They're sort of shortened to JOTs, and talk a little bit about what you need to know about them as a JavaScript dev. We're also going to go a little tiny bit into what Auth is and how JSON Web Tokens fit in with like a whole Auth system. So essentially, how do we use JOTs to prove a user is who they say they are inside of this very complicated Auth system? All right, really quick, I just want to talk about like my company a little bit. I work right now at a company called Fusion Auth. So they are CIAM, Customer Identity and Access Management. Have a lot of different tiers. We have like a free community tier where quite a lot of our user base is on right now. And we do authorization and authentication and produce and vend a whole lot of JOTs. A little bit about me. I used to live in Bend. I now live in Colorado. My name is Akira, former opera singer turned coder. I work in DevRel now, again at Fusion Auth. And I am a self-taught JS dev, and I have a little bit of backend experience as well. Okay, so what are we going to do today? First off, we're going to talk about what is Auth, how JOTs fit into that process, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end. I know we have a lot of people that are talking today, so that might be a little bit abbreviated. So this will take probably, I want to say 20 minutes. Might go a little longer, might go a little shorter. All right, so what is Auth? So Auth is essentially twofold. There's authorization, which is what you can access based on who you are, which is authentication. So say, for example, when a user authenticates to a server, they're going to prove who they are to that server. They're going to prove they are who they say they are. When a server authorizes a user, they're saying, yep, like this user is who they say they are, and based on who they say they are, they can access particular resources. So let's talk a little bit about our app that we're going to make and kind of illustrate JOTs inside of, and also the Auth flow. This would be like a service-oriented architecture, and we can talk a bit about why JOTs would be good fit for some of them and why they would not be a good fit for others. So first off, we have on the left side here, we have our untrusted open web. So of course, that's like the little globe here and the little phone or Palm Pilot, depending what generation you're from. Everything to the left or on that left side, I think it is your guys' left too, is the untrusted open web. And then everything on the right side, like the user API, the user data store, the to-do API, and the to-do data store, that is on the trusted server side communication. With proper authentication and authorization, you want to keep as much communication on the trusted server side as you possibly can. And of course, in this app, it's a little bit overkill. You probably won't have 2 APIs to do a quick to-do list. But in this case, of course, we want to illustrate how APIs communicate with each other. So our user API might have certain roles, user role, users themselves, and then of course roles within all that. And then the to-do API might have a data store just of regular old like to-do items. So why would you use one type of token over the other? Or why would you use a JOT over maybe something like an opaque token? Sometimes the best way to understand what a JOT is or does is to understand what it doesn't do. And what maybe another type of token does. So we're going to talk really quickly about opaque tokens, and then we'll kind of compare and contrast that with a JOT. So how would an opaque token work to authenticate a user to a server? So here we go. First things first, a user logs in from their phone or their Safari or whatever, and they send a request to the user API that says, hey, like, here's my username, here's my password. I want you to, as far as the user is concerned, they just want their stuff back, right? Like they're not worried about authentication and all that. But essentially it's passing a username and password to the user API. The user API would look for that user ID and the password in their user data store. And then once they verify that, instead of just giving back like a user object, which is what would happen in a very naive implementation, they're going to issue back an opaque token. So an opaque token is just a random string of characters. It doesn't necessarily, you can't examine it. That's why it's called opaque. But that token is passed back to the user, and that user can then pass that or present that token to a to-do API. It says, okay, the user API, which is a trusted server, says I am who I say I am. They're able to prove it using this opaque token. So will you please give me the to-dos that match me, that I am who I say I am. So the to-do API says, well, I mean, maybe, right? Like I kind of trust this token, but I'm just going to verify over here again on this trusted server side that you are who you say you are and that the user API did in fact issue that token. So then the to-do API goes to the user API via a GET request. And then the user API verifies that, yep, I did issue that token. We're good here. You can give this user the data that they're requesting. So the to-do API goes, okay, cool, goes into its to-dos data store and gives the to-do back to the user. So that seems pretty cool, right? Like so far so good. Like why is that maybe not the best way to do things all the time? There's a couple footnotes though, right? First off, it can be really chatty. There's a lot of messaging going on like all the time. And the biggest one is the user API is coupled to everything for the most part. So if I go back to this previous slide, you can see if you had multiple APIs that needed to verify that this token was in fact coming back from this user API, they would have to make GET requests all the time to that user API, like, hey, is this true? Like, did you issue this token? If the user API falls down or something happens, your whole app is done. So this might be really good for like a smaller app that maybe only has a couple APIs or something like that. But if you start having giant distributed systems, opaque tokens, since they are coupled, it can just be it can be kind of hairy. So this is where JOTs come to the rescue. And I was going to use a Buzz Lightyear picture, but I was like, I don't want to get sued by Disney. So you're going to have to just imagine it. All right, so here we go. Same kind of flow. Let's talk about the data flow of a JOT. So a JOT, a user logs in, passes their username and password to the user API, similar experience. User API says, yep, okay, that person does exist in my user data store. But instead of passing an opaque token, they are going to pass a jot, which then the user can then present to the to-do API as, again, verification as an authentication token. Say, okay, yep, I am who I say I am. This has been issued by a trusted authorization server. So as you can see so far, it's the same flow, but in this case, the to-do API will do some things different with that token. So instead of going back to the user API and saying, hey, I need you to verify that you did issue this, what they'll do is they will actually sort of reflectively look at the jot itself and make sure that it is a valid jot. And we're going to get into how that happens in just a minute. One thing that is worth mentioning that I'll mention several times is that jots are signed for the most part. Most jots are signed. They can also be encrypted, but you will see mostly signed jots in the wild. If a jot has been tampered with, that's how if a jot has been tampered with, the signature of the jot doesn't match the payload. But again, we'll get into that a little bit more in a second. Okay, so let's talk about anatomy of a jot. Okay, so there's 3 parts to a jot. First part is the header. That's in green here. The second part is the payload or the body, which is in blue. And then the third part is the signature, which is in white. So what does all that mean, right? So if you decode the header, here's what you would get. You would get the type of algorithm that was used to sign this jot, as well as what type of data this is. This is a JSON Web Token. And then you can examine the body like so and decode it. And there's several things that you'll see. In this particular example, you can see this is just regular JSON data. There's what are called claims, which is essentially the keys, and then the values of those claims. So ISS stands for issuer, EXP stands for expiration, AUD is audience, SUB is subject, and then name and roles. There's not a quiz. You don't need to remember all of that, and we'll go over the claims a little bit more in detail in just a minute. The thing that I do want to call out here, though, is that there are standardized claims such as ISS and EXP, and then there's non-standardized claims such as name and roles. Anything that you can put in JSON, you can put in a JSON Web Token. So, for example, in the name claim, again, which is just a fancy name for a key value pair, you can put a string of a name. And in the roles claim, you can put an array of strings as well. So anything you can put in a JSON object, you can put in the body of a JSON Web Token. And then the last piece is the signature. So let's talk a little bit about why is that signature important. So again, when the authorization server generates a JSON Web Token, they will sign it. So what they'll do is they'll take the header, which has the algorithm that's being used to sign the JSON Web Token. Then they'll take the body, and through some amazing cryptology stuff that I don't fully understand yet, they generate a signature. And what happens is the signature matches that payload of data. So if a malicious actor intercepts your JSON Web Token, which is actually shockingly easy and a little bit disturbing, you can just get it from the dev tools, they can examine the payload easily. And we're going to do this in a little bit. We're actually going to look at a couple of jots and examine them and be like, wait a minute, I can just see anything I want? Yes, you can. So they can examine that payload. However, if they tamper with it, that signature is no longer going to match that payload. So say, for example, the authorization server generates a jot and passes it back to the client. Somewhere in that communication, a malicious actor somehow gets a hold of the jot and tries to tamper with the payload and then send it to maybe the to-do API to get, well, I don't want to get the to-dos for user Akira Brand. I want to get the to-dos for user John Doe. Well, once that's presented to the to-do API, because that signature doesn't match the payload, the to-do API will immediately say, nope, this is invalid. Like, I can't use this to say that you are who you say, or I can't use this to authenticate you. So the payload itself is not secure, but it is trustworthy. So one thing I do want to, again, one more time call out, well, if I can decode a JWT, how can that be considered secure? I get this question a lot. First off, it's layers of security, right? So there's a couple different things you can do to make sure, aside from the signature, that your JWT is more secure than just passing, arbitrary JSON data. And so we're going to go over that a little tiny bit. So first off, let's examine the claims of the JWT. So here's the body again. So when you are sending a JWT, it's a really good idea to use a library to examine the claims on the receiving API side. So for example, ISS stands for issuer. This is saying who issued this JWT. In this case, it would be fusionauth.io, or it could be Auth0, Okta, or it could be like any kind of handmade or homegrown Auth solution. But it should have a way to then validate it on like the to-do API side. Is the issuer of this JWT who I'm expecting it to be from? Second thing is EXP, that's expiration. JSON Web Tokens are bearer tokens, which essentially means that anyone that has them can use them to authenticate. So it's a good idea to have an expiration date so that these bearer tokens are not just floating around in cyberspace for an indeterminate amount of time. And again, when the to-do API would receive this JWT, it could say, okay, is the expiration date legit? Or has this token expired? The audience is who is the JWT for? So, okay, am I the intended audience? Or has someone intercepted a JWT and is trying to give it to me, but I'm not actually the intended audience? The subject is who is it about? And again, those last two are just arbitrary JSON data, but you could also validate those claims if you wanted to. So maybe you can say, for this particular role, I'm only going to take a JWT that has the role of admin and only has the name of a hero brand or Dan Moore or Chris Quaye or whatever. Okay, then there's another layer of security that you can also add to JWTs. And this is public-private key pairs. So this is also called like an asymmetric JWT signature. And it uses a public-private key pair. So essentially what this does is it possesses a unique property where a signature that is generated on the authorization server side with a private key can be verified later with the public key. So let's go over that a little tiny bit. So again, kind of in the same flow where your user logs in, the user API looks them up, says, yep, you exist in my user data store, and then it signs the JWT with a private key. Now it will pass it back to the user, the JWT, and then the user will present that JWT to the to-do API. The to-do API sees, oh, this has been signed with a private key, and I need to find the matching public key to verify that this was signed with the correct private key. Now, these public keys are widely available. If you're using a service like FusionAuth, there's a place where you can tell your to-do API to go to look up the matching public key for the private key that it used to sign the JWT in the first place. The public key does not decode the private key. It merely verifies, again, an extra layer that the user API or the trusted authorization server is the entity that generated and signed this JWT. So if you are definitely thinking of adding an extra layer of security to your JWTs, that's another option you can have. So you have just the basic, which is having it signed. Then you have the second layer, which is making sure you diligently examine the claims on your to-do API side, whoever's receiving that JWT. And then again, this third layer would be to use a public-private key pair. Okay. Oh yeah, and then we can go back here and get the public keys that have been generated by FusionAuth. All right. So again, some flip guns here. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. This is more complicated to implement. It's certainly much more slow. So it just kind of depends on your use case, right? If you're creating an example app that's a to-do app or something, then this is definitely overkill. However, if you're using JSON Web Tokens in an app where maybe it's banking or healthcare, then this actually might be a very wise decision. So it is more secure. So let's talk a little about some benefits of JOTs. That signature adds an extra layer of security. And then you can also have public-private key pairs, which are asymmetric, or you can have symmetric keys. You can validate it by the To-Do API without having to call that user API. So everything is decoupled. Whereas in that first example, we were talking about opaque tokens, the To-Do API and the user API were coupled together for every single thing. Whereas this is decoupled and it's stateless. Again, anything you can put in JSON, you can put in a JSON Web Token. And it is a bearer token, which again means it doesn't matter who gives it to the resource server at the end of the day. What matters is that it is presented in the first place. But since it is signed, again, it's not necessarily secure. You don't ever want to pass secure data in the payload of the JOT, but it is trusted. So that is useful. Couple gotchas though, right? There's definitely some pitfalls in using JOTs. First off, there's a lot of configuration options, especially with claims. There's many, many more claims than what I showed you. And because because you can use arbitrary JSON data, you need to definitely make sure that those claims are verified on the API that is consuming or receiving that JOT. You can get around this by using a library, but it's definitely a good idea to verify your claims at a bare minimum. Don't just rely on the signatures. It's just kind of not best practice. And then again, if you maybe don't understand that you can intercept a JOT and just examine it, and you're using JOTs, maybe you would make a mistake and put sensitive data in the payload. So maybe you would think, oh, it's a JOT, so it must be inherently secure. But again, it's not secure, but it's trusted, which are two separate things. So if you end up passing like social security numbers or birthdays, anything like that in a JOT, that can cause a lot of trouble. So no secrets. Okay, let's talk a bit about token storage. So what do you do with these things once you have them, right? The best way to deal with them is to keep them on the server side. So this is called the BFF, or backend for front end pattern. If you do need to store them on the browser, use an HTTP only cookie. You might get some cross-site scripting, so just be careful. You especially will get cross-site scripted. I'm not sure if that's a real word, but it is now, if you're using local or session storage. And on mobile, just push it down into secure storage. So a couple of tools that we're going to go over. I did want to show you this debugger, which is pretty cool. It's just an example of, here's a JOT that you can decode. So this is a real JOT, and then you will decode it here. And here's the header. The type is a JOT, and the algorithm is HS256. And then here is the payload. So you can also go into the dev tools in the network tab and like grab anything that says token bearer. That is a JOT. So you can grab that and paste it in something like a JOT debugger and examine the payload. And again, the first time people do that, it really freaks them out, which makes, of course, perfect sense. But just remember, if this payload right here, this blue part, and this signature don't match up, then the JOT is invalid. So it can't be used to get access to things that you shouldn't be able to get access to. And then, a couple more like articles that I have. I'll post these slides afterward if people want to learn a little bit more about that. And that's it. We're at exactly 20 minutes. I wanted to just call it really quick. Kyle's been gracious enough to be willing to distribute some t-shirts. Since we have a ton of t-shirts, I was like, hey, can we give some to the Bend JavaScript people? And my company's like, hell yeah. So we're gonna pass out t-shirts at the next meetup. If you want to learn a little bit more about OAuth in general and authentication and authorization, we wrote a really awesome, it's pretty long, it's a really big ebook called The Modern Guide to OAuth, and it's free. You just go to that link and sign up for the ebook, and we'll give it to you. It's got a ton of really good info. It has the most complete OAuth standards as of right now. And since OAuth is such a really complicated and giant topic, like JOTs is like a very tiny portion of OAuth. It's just good to have on hand. So that is free. If you want, you can scan that QR code, and it's up for grabs. And then let's see, we are at 22 minutes. I think we might have like time for maybe like 1 or 2 questions. If I'd like to open that floor if we can.
What's up?
What's up? Hey.
Wait, I have some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you pronounce it just one more time?
Yeah. So
Jot.
it's Jot.
Is that for sure official?
I mean, that's what everyone calls them. When I first was hearing the lingo, I was really confused. But yeah, people call them Jots.
Like J-O-T, Jots.
Yeah, Jot. Say it again, Jot.
No, I'm not going to say it again. Just kidding, but I do hate it. What? So they're like a header, right? Like if you have your browser open, right, to Fusion Auth. So presumably, presumably y'all use it for yourselves, right? Could you open like your dev tools and like look at a header and see? I want to see I want to see a real Jot.
You want to see a real Jot?
Oh, I said it. I said I wasn't going to say it.
Let's see here. Where is I'm looking for?
Is it a resource or is it like a header or something?
It should be in your headers. Yes.
Right. So I don't even know where to look.
I had them in network tab, but I'm not sure we have them on this particular page.
You're filtered to JS though. Wouldn't it be like part of the HTML request or something if you just hit all instead of JS?
Yeah, let's
or
do that.
XHR, yeah, whatever.
Okay, here we go. Let's see, all. I think I have to refresh. Oh my god.
Sorry to put you on the spot. You know if it's.
Oh no, it's all good. If I can't find it, I will definitely like do a little like video or something. Like here it is, I found it. Here, nope. Okay, I'll have to find that another time and just post it. Picture.
Fetch XHR. There, everybody says, like, and then there's one.
Yeah, click on that one.
But that's.
You want me to click on this one?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Look in the header. Bear token?
No bear. You can just look in your cookies, right?
It's not a cookie, or is it?
No, it's not a cookie. It can be stored in a cookie, but it itself is not a cookie.
All right, that was my only. Does anybody else have questions? I can.
Yeah, what happens when your user logs out? You erase their JWT so they can't use it anymore?
Yeah, what's the logout story? Well, user logs out. Do you delete the JWTs or how does
That's a good question. I'm still learning a little bit about that because you technically can't destroy a jot, but you can give it an expiration time. So the best way to deal with that is to here, I'm gonna mute myself. It's kind of weird. The best way to deal with that is to give a short expiration time to a jot when you issue it. And then have a sort of vending flow where you consistently go back to the authorization server and say, hey, it's been 2 minutes, give me another jot. Okay, it's been 2 minutes, give me another jot. And then once the user logs out, the authorization server would say, sorry, this user logged out, like I'm not gonna issue any more jots.
So like super short-lived.
Really short-lived, yeah. Like you don't want a jot that lives for more than a couple minutes.
So we have a question from online.
Okay.
I've heard that JWT body can be encrypted? Question mark?
The body of the jot can it be encrypted? It kind of is. Well, it's not really encrypted.
It can be, yeah. So there's signed jots and there's encrypted jots. You don't see encrypted jots as much, but yes, they can be.
It can be.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, the signature of a jot, how do I say this? Okay, you know what? Let me pause on that because I don't want to like accidentally lie to you. But yeah, we look a little bit more into that too, and I can post that on the Ben JavaScript Slack.
And sometimes it's a real person, right? Like you have a jot for logging into. You probably have more than you realize, right? Because tons of services use them for user auth, right? But they're also can they also be used for like server to server communication, right? Like my little microservices talk to each other with JOTs or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, they can be. It also sort of depends too on what kind of system you're running. Like you can do server to server with JOTs. And I didn't mention this because it's not good practice in necessarily web development, but sometimes if you're doing trusted server to server, you can actually use unsigned JOTs. That is sort of not the best first way to approach JOTs, but if every single thing on your network is known and trusted, you don't necessarily have to sign the JOT, and that can also make the authentication much faster because then you don't have to deal with signatures.
Cool. Final thoughts?
Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Akira.
Yeah! Thanks for having me, you guys.
Up next, we got John D.
Take care.
talking about prototyping and some cool thing he built. I don't know exactly what, but he's going to go into prototyping and how to build products really fast.
Nice. So you need a URL from me if that's cool. Can I send you
I already
one?
sent it to him.
You already
Look
got
in
it,
your
man.
Slack. And then if you look in your Slack, I DM'd you the link to join the chat, and then we'll hook you up to the HDMI.
I'm not on the Wi-Fi.
It's public.
Okay.
What's it called? Worthy guest. Yeah, if anyone needs Wi-Fi, it's worthy guest, public Wi-Fi. So don't open your bank or anything like that. Yeah. There's right here for you. Anyone going to BDC over the next couple of days?
Yeah.
Couple people? You're volunteering? Yes. Very cool. Just going. Going to BDC. BendJS conference. Tomorrow night and all day Friday. You can still come and hang out and like shame everybody for not letting you in. Like whenever I just sold you. I just had an exit. Yeah. Yeah, great. You got a good live stream. Like, you know, you guys are the core group. Obviously, last couple months have been a little light on attendance. Hopefully, that'll start picking back up as we move into the new year. But what do you want to see? Do you like normal presentations? Is there something else we can do to, you know, keep it interesting? On the spot right now. Come on, let's get our idea. Let's go. I like this. Functionality or core
see me?
group, especially because all the other tech meetups
yeah.
are shut down. Aren't really joining back up, but you know, any ideas for what we can do in the future
The panel would be cool. That's fun. I like that.
Yeah, and post some questions and stuff, and get kind of a random group up there or something. All right, well, if anyone would want to be part of a panel and just get questions peppered at them, like, send me an DM, because that would be fun too.
Is there a theme to the panel?
Answer questions and get judged. All right, we're ready.
Some quiz night?
Yeah. I mean, it turned into a, it was definitely a big conversation, and we're really open to anything. Hackathons, if we want to do more hands-on groups, everyone brings their computer and we hack on something. Like I said, panels, anything. So
training on something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Computer.
So the floor is really open. So any ideas that you have on even one-offs, where hey, this month this is going to be the theme and this is what we focus on. If you ever have an idea, please just shoot me or Chris a DM, and we'll incorporate that. All right, so John is going to be wowing us with prototypes and stuff.
I don't promise that.
I don't know. I checked out your service. It was pretty cool. So
Let's do
I'm
it.
expecting some wow.
Okay, so I didn't 100% prepare it to make sense to be live streamed at the same time. So I'll just kind of wing that, and hopefully in the future it'll make more sense. So good evening, everybody. I'm John Davison, founder of Startup Landia. It's a product-focused dev shop. I got into prototyping in 2012 in San Francisco, and I've been doing it for a long time now. And this is just, it's a bit of a hobby and a professional pursuit. So this is a JS meetup, right? And I'm actually going to talk about an app that's primarily made in Rails with a little bit of JS. So I figured I would show some JavaScript that I've written in the past, just so, there's something to look at. As you look at these Vim sort of screenshots, you go from left to right, you just see an abstraction I wrote in MobX that was like, hey, I get really tired of building forms in React. And so this is a kind of an abstraction where you feed React an array of JSON, and then it spits you back out a fully bound form. It was, it was real cutting edge like 4 years ago. But it's still in production. It still works. It's not the point of what I'm going to talk about tonight, but I figured I'd show it anyways. So do this ASAP versus I want to build this ASAP, right? Like, who here has been told, do this ASAP, right? And who here has said, I want to build this ASAP, right? Well, I've said it. The thing is, they have different meanings, right? And in the traditional sense, soon, right? I want this as soon as possible versus my kind of ASAP, which is I want this as simple as possible. And that brings us to the kind of tonight's demonstration. So I think a handful of people in the Slack actually sort of like used the service and you purchased a ticket tonight, right? So maybe a couple of people got text messages for tonight's event, right? Maybe show me your phone, show you what you got, like, right? Like I signed up for tonight and I got a ticket. And what Fanfare is it's, and I'm not trying to convert you guys to users. I'm literally just talking about this prototype that I've made. Like, unless you're musicians trying to make money off live musical events, it's not really an event. It's not really an app for you. But effectively what it is it's a ticketing platform that it shifts the locus of when you pay for a ticket from, 3 weeks before an event, like to the actual live event, right? So you guys probably in the staging server saw it asked you to spend $5, and there was like Stripe data, so there was a fake Stripe credit card, so you can just sort of go through that. But what we're looking to do is like capture a person's credit card and give them a ticket to get into the show. But what we really want is for a person to have the opportunity at a show to decide, is this an amazing show? Do I want to like maybe pay more than $25? And I'm working with an artist in the Bay Area who during COVID was doing a lot of pop-up shows. And he noticed that if he did a great show, people had a lot of desire to sort of pay more. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually, as the owner of this event, I am going to, oh, interesting, something went wrong.
Debugging.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do a ton of live demos anymore. My Auth token expired.
It's because you didn't have JWT?
No, probably because I have a good short-term window set. So thank you, Akira, for confirming some things that I've done. Anyways, and maybe that I still need to do. So I'm gonna now I'm gonna make my event live, right? And theoretically, anybody that has signed up for the event will now receive a text message saying, "Perfect," right? I received a text message that said,
I got mine too.
yes, that says, "We hope you're loving the show. How much would you like to add to the ticket minimum you already paid? Text us back with a number between 5 and 100, and that amount will go straight to the artist," right? So since I'm really enjoying my talk, and to make good on my talk, since it's called a flute jam, I brought my flute and I'm going to jam for a moment, right?
Yeah.
Because, right, we all know how JavaScript works.
I texted $69.
All right, I'm not really warmed up, so that's all we're going to do. But I loved myself, so I'm going to also say 10, and then I'm going to add some extra message, whatever, kind of like Venmo. And then if everything works correctly, the server will tell me back, "Perfect, awesome, we've got you down for 10. Enjoy the love," right?
And that was just a text back.
Yep. And so now if I refresh my page, right, like the artist side of the house, I can see that, let's see, I paid 10. Chris Coyer paid 69. Excuse me if I'm butchering your last name. And Mark Pernetto paid 99. So the whole point of this app is to sort of direct pay artists live and for it to happen like very simply. Because like if you're at an event, you're at a show, you don't have time to like log in, you're not going to a link, you're not downloading an app. And even Venmo in a lot of ways doesn't make sense because it kind of requires a user to like actually look at your Venmo QR code and be like, "Oh, I'm going to go to Venmo." But in this manner, we've kind of already skipped a lot of the logistics and we're moving right to the transfer of money, assuming that the event is good. And so coming back to my slides and the whole like prototyping and, you know, how does all of this really not turn into a product pitch, which I swear it's not. Soon and simple are just not the same, right? Problems with soon. It's really rushed work. There's no time to think about edge cases. I think it creates an incredibly disrespectful sort of human interaction, which, you know, doesn't do well in the long run. And, you know, there's usually a lot of bugs that nobody thought about because like if you're doing this really fast, there's no time to really create extra space to think. And thinking and automated money transactions, you know, you want to like kind of do this stuff properly. Like I've been on the other side of the house where people were like, "Whatever, ship it." And like after you run the routine and it breaks and it charges 1,000 people the wrong amount of money, it's not cool. Never cool. Principles that I really bring to the table when I'm prototyping is that slow is fast and fast is slow. I love paper mache, right? Usually when I build something, I build kind of like a very rough working version of it that proves out the user experience and it proves out that all the technology works. And then you kind of go back and really paint it with the visual designer's brush. We're always looking to make smart programming trade-offs, which is really about like abstraction versus, you know, what is acceptable for now, especially in prototyping in the kind of 0 to 1 range. Most of what I've seen is way too abstract, right? Like even the process of abstracting is usually a waste of time because until a lot of people are using something, abstracting it is just not, it's not really a relevant tool. And a ship must always survive the storm, right? Like I don't care if there is slowness, if there are problems, if the user has an issue, you always want your ship to make it through the storm. And that's how we test this stuff. And these are the, you know, these are my guiding principles. And some basic statistics around this build, right? It was literally 90 build hours to my, you know, my counterpart, who's the other person, he's an artist. Eventually he'll pay me for the project. But it was literally 90 hours over 4 months. And like, I mean, maybe if you could compress that into like 3 weeks of work, it would be really astounding. But for me, it was like literally my back burner project while I'm like running the business, right? Running Startup Land U, which is its own entity all in of itself. I think one of the benefits of going pretty slow over this extended period of time is that I'm coding very infrequently and thinking a lot. So like a lot of thought goes into all the code before I sit down to write anything. And in fact, I think in most cases, I don't really build anything until I kind of have like the entire abstract system worked out in my head. How do I want this to work? How do I want the models to work? How do the API calls, all the external tools, all that stuff. I use really simple tools, Rails, plain JavaScript, Postgres, Heroku. I mean, like I've gone down the like very complex side of like Relay, React, GraphQL, custom Webpacks, tree shaking. I've done a lot of that stuff in production, and I think under certain use cases, it makes a ton of sense. In prototyping, I really want to use tools that I don't have to think about and tools that really aren't going to have any maintenance. I mean, of course, all code needs a little bit of maintenance, but that's a huge spectrum of like, you know, a tiny bit of maintenance over a period of 3 years versus, you know, if I'm not keeping track of this every 90 days or every 6 months, my libraries are going to get out of sync. And like, I can't have that, especially on projects like this, because like I'm going to put an artist in control of this app. And it's like, hey, great, go break it for months and tell me what you find. And then when you find interesting things, we'll improve the app and we'll move forward. So, you know, some core principles. I love paper mache. I kind of talked about it as we moved through that, so I won't reiterate that. Some smart programming trade-offs. I generally like to write relatively rough controller endpoints. I think in Express, you kind of, in Node Express, we use the word controller. Is that common for everybody in the group? Yeah, it's like a place that receives a web request. In this particular app, I relied on Stripe as much as possible. So even though you guys couldn't see it now, the credit card form is literally Stripe's form. I didn't really do any styling. It works right out of the box. It has a bunch of good error handling. It does an asynchronous call to validate a credit card. It's a phenomenal tool that's like one line of code, right? I didn't build very many helpers or abstractions. There's kind of like this general rule of thumb that I like to think about. Like if you have more than 10 models, you might be building more than a prototype, right? This app had, I think, 7, and that's a total arbitrary number, by the way. I usually code assuming that I'm going to be the only developer for a while. And I know that's not like common, especially on a large code base, but on a prototype, you know, I'm coding for myself. And I'm assuming that I will one day in time pass this off to a code base. But I actually write clean code for myself as well. It's just, I'm not thinking that this code base is going to make it to 100 engineers. I'm thinking that, you know, this code base might make it to 3 other engineers. And one of those engineers is going to actually have to care about onboarding and possibly refactoring code, right? Like refactoring is something that I set the code base up for. It's not necessarily something that I obsess over at the beginning. Accepting payments started at. It's a very long property name, right? Like I guess I got this when I did some iOS programming. I like long property names, right? Like they can be very revealing. They're a little bit tough to look at on screen. And like, I think like the Airbnb style guide, you know, they're like 80 characters or 90 characters in a line. And that's very limiting. And so, you know, I like Daft Punk. And if you like that song where Giorgio Moroder talks about like, you know, I really came alive when I started to ignore what people told me to do. And a lot of my professional career as a dev, you know, you got to learn what people want. And then at another point in time, you got to decide your own values. And for me, my own values are definitely line links greater than 90 characters because I want descriptive property names. Accepting payments started at. It's literally like I don't have to think about what that means. I know exactly what it means. I don't got to remember what I was thinking in that moment. Because, you know, I'm on like 5 code bases at any given moment. So like, I'm not really remembering a ton of what I write. If I don't write good tests or it's not really obvious, I have to spend time re-onboarding that code in the future. And I really don't want to spend time doing that. The Sea of Japan is rough in the winter. I used to be in the Navy. The Sea of Japan is nuts. It's like 9-foot seas in the winter. It's crazy. You don't want to do that. That's literally just a hat tip to like, automated tests, whatever you got to do, but an app has to stand up to usage. You got to be able to trust it, especially when money's involved. So the top screenshot, if you're not familiar with RSpec, is just it's a running of the tests. And a lot of people on prototypes really ignore sort of model level unit testing. And I think that's like, you're just setting yourself up for a huge sort of mistake. And so in those 80 or 90 hours that I spent on this prototype, not only is there like functioning SMS-based user payments, there's also like a proper test suite that I trust, right? Like I could hand this code base over to another developer and be like, great, you got it. Or if a founder asked me if I trusted it, I'd be like, of course I trust it. My business is literally accountable to Stripe now. And for anyone that hasn't set up their own Stripe account, I think Stripe is having to get a lot more regulated and a lot more accountable to the government. So like, I can't just do whatever I want, financially speaking. I actually have to be able to justify, if I took money, who did I take it from? And if I paid out money, who did that money get paid out to? So I actually have to be pretty, I have to have reasonable degree of water integrity in the app. And that is most of the slides. This is a little bit of feedback that we got on the app like October 5th. This is my partner, Chris. He posted it on Facebook. It got 53 likes, 22 comments, a bunch of people saying, oh, this is great. We love it. We'll see if that stuff matters, right? Like I'm sort of the engineer and product person behind this. He gave me an idea and I built it for him. And he's really the product owner and the sort of growth driver. We'll see if it goes anywhere. In closing, this is a tweet from one of my business partners who's still in the Bay Area. Kyle Wild, he's one of the former CEOs of Keen.io. And he and I were in Cleveland 2 weeks ago on a business trip. And it sucks because we get into so many situations where people overbuild. And we keep coming back to the same advice, just simplify your stack and all of these engineering problems go away. And it sucks because like, it feels like we're always having the same solution, but like we can't ignore reality, right? Like sometimes Rails and Heroku for a lot of things is all that is necessary. And I don't necessarily mean to say use Ruby or don't use JavaScript. I'm just saying that for the tools that we know, those tend to be really effective tools. And I do write a lot of JavaScript on other projects, just not particularly this project. I like to write JavaScript on projects that I know that have a lot of economic value. And when I'm prototyping, I don't really know if this thing has any kind of economic value. So in his quote, optimize your engineering decisions for iteration, speed, and observability. And it's, look, it got like 800 likes in like 2 days. Neither of us expected that. And apparently it resonated with a lot of technical people on the internet. And that is my lightning talk.
That was great. I agree.
Quick questions? Should we do Q&A?
Yeah.
So you might have to like
Meet the founder? Do we have a fireside chat?
You might have to repeat the questions just for the live stream and the YouTube afterwards. But so I'm just kind of curious. This, it's obviously a super unpopular opinion or question, I guess, within an engineering community. But where do you see, since you're talking about prototyping, the rise of WYSIWYG editors and that type of prototyping fitting into what you're doing? Is there a place for that? Is that like for just non-technical people, or is there a place for that in what you're doing to rapidly prototype, maybe with the addition of specific API calls to a custom-built backend?
Sure. I mean, I like Mark. I think Mark Andreessen's quote still matters. Software is eating the world, and we see a lot of projects at Startup Landia that people are getting off the ground with WYSIWYG and no code tools, and literally they're developers, right? And they're just developers operating at a certain degree of sort of granularity, a lack thereof in these cases. And a lot of those projects really have a very limited sort of lifespan when it comes to scalability and configurability and observability, right? And speed. So if you come back to this tweet, speed and observability, those kind of go out the window when a lot of those tools start to scale or you need to change it. And so we see a fair amount of that stuff where people need to rebuild because they like want to go for a Series A and they like really need to like up the quality of that game. And so I'm generally very pro and supportive of any tool that is going to help a person create or do or conduct any kind of technical creation. And I think it's even wrong to call it like a no code tool. You're still really writing code. You're giving a machine instructions. It's just like you're doing it with slightly different kind of paintbrush or something. So
where do you see the breaking point for a business in terms of moving from a prototype model to a more a fully functional model for building an app? Can you go all the way through a Series A with a prototype model like the one that you just built? Or is after maybe a seed round, or is it before you go get funding? At what point do you decide, hey, no matter what it is, whether it's WYSIWYG or a low code, a very basic coded application like the 90 hours you spent on this model, where would normally you see that breaking point between saying, okay, we need to actually put more resources into iterating on this code base to make this a real, quote unquote business?
Sure. So with the no-code tools, we tend to see it in the seed range. And I specifically built Startup Landia around the idea that I want to prototype, and I want people to take these prototypes from seed to Series A and beyond. And so there are various startups in existence right now where their original build came from me, and they're deep in the proverbial shit by now. Like Brightwheel was a company on Shark Tank like 3 years ago. They got around from Mark Cuban, and I fully helped them prototype everything. And I'm almost absolutely certain that they're still running that same stack today because all the screenshots are the same, all the interface is the same. They're not going to like yank the back. I mean, we yanked a back end out and replaced it with this. And so I specifically want people to be able to come to Startup Landia and spend between like 20 and 75K and walk away with a prototype that they can easily take to professional developers and a full Series A. And sometime
between the seed and Series A is kind of on average what you'd recommend.
Yeah, and the thing about that like 20K to 75K range that I think is really important and that I kind of coach people to think about is that you could do this with a no-code tool. And if you have no money and infinite amount of time, a no-code tool might make a lot of sense. But what you're going to be able to build in 3 months of a no-code tool is still pretty rough in terms of like what I do in my spare time. And so that's like, and like I'm very prototype focused. Like I'm definitely not an engineer you want to do like a distributed Elixir system, even though I've done like Elixir prototypes for fun. I'm like, can I do this in Elixir? I've done it once, but like, you don't want me to like take over a massive Elixir stack. That's not going to work well.
So I mean, I guess just kind of talking in generalities in terms of like, if even an engineer is looking to build a business and try out something, like where do they start? How does someone, even with the tools and skills to do this, really tweak their mindset to make sure that they're not going so deep into the weeds that they're going to get lost and never get to that phase of actually putting something out in production for themselves? Obviously, when you're building a spec or you're working for another company, it's a lot easier. But yeah, maybe just since you have some expertise in this, kind of just wondering for everyone else who might look at this, what would your recommendation be for getting your mindset in the right place to build a prototype that can do enough to get you going and off the ground?
Yeah, I think that it's like try to nurture the desire to show something off, right? Like, and I know that can feel like ego driven. It's not like I'm showing it off because I'm the best, but it's like I'm showing it off because it exists, right? Like, and it could be a very rough thing that exists, but it still exists, right? Like, if I want to like show this, right, it has to be reasonably complete. And the process of being like, I'm going to show this object to somebody else can be very, I think, delineating in terms of like forcing you to get to that moment where you have a complete object rather than being like, oh, I need to fix this or I need to fix that. You know, build the desire to want to actually demo something that does something, kind of like what I just did here. Like I literally just collected $200 in fake Stripe dollars, right? And the production server does the same thing, just obviously not going to use a production
Wait, that wasn't
server.
in production?
You know, staging.fanfare.
So, okay, there's a little app, you sign up for a ticket, you get it, you go to a show, and then it hits you up, and it's like, do you want to give them $10 or whatever?
That's right.
And you do it or whatever. The tech of that is like, like a little bit interesting, right? Some Twilio, some Stripe, whatever. You wired some simple shit together and call it a day, right?
Yeah.
So like, from a startup perspective, the tech is never going to be interesting, right? It's only like,
It's a use
how many
case.
bands do you know, right?
Yeah.
Like if I was going to invest in you, like I don't give a shit about the tech, right? Like is that your point, kind of? That like I want to know like who's your industry connections? Are you going to get Kanye West to use it or some shit? Are you going to like? Is that your involvement with these prototypes? Is like I don't know. I'm just curious about like. There's a lot of focus on tech when the point was that the tech doesn't matter.
In my talk? I mean, I feel like I'm just trying to talk about the prototyping process and not necessarily focus on the use case or talk about the broader landscape.
Just like in going into the product is like with your customers,
Mm-hmm.
they don't necessarily care about the tech. So you're trying to prototype out something that works for them, that shows them the finished product.
Which is so cool. I love
That
it.
is like really cool, that fits their use case. And then once they want to dive in, that's when kind of all the back end magic happens. Maybe you get some funding, you hire some engineers, you build out the tech. They don't really care, but your purpose is like take an idea, turn it into an actionable item, an actionable app as quickly as possible. And that's kind of what your focus is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And,
The worst mistake would be to spend 2 years prototyping like
Yeah.
the most. Yeah. Right.
yeah. And to your point, my partner is a saxophonist that plays with Afrolicious in the Bay Area, and he has tons of music.
Nice.
He has tons of music connections. And so it's really actually on him in this case to drive the sort of growth side. We have very complementary skills here. I liked his vision and I was like, yes, I'm going to do this.
Nice. So it is your actual startup idea, right? Or is it?
Well,
startup
he
idea?
told me the problem,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do to solve it.
Nice.
Yeah. So like, and that's where I excel, where founders are like, I have a vision of this thing. I have a cocktail napkin sort of understanding of a problem. How do we actually make that into a piece of functional software that someone would talk to me about?
Nice. Yeah.
All right, well, and then
So cool.
since you're out there 2 minutes, and I kind of mentioned to you, the whole purpose of this isn't to do like product pitches
No.
specifically or whatever.
I hope
Like,
it doesn't feel
hey,
like that. I hope it doesn't feel like a
no,
product pitch.
But
Because I've done a lot of product pitches, and
my point to you is, while you're up here, like, shameless promotion, like what is Startup Landia? Just tell us a little bit about how you got into this.
Sure. Startup Landia was like, I've been at a lot of startups. I love prototyping. I'm not really a good engineer for a large business. I don't really like doing what I'm told, but I kind of like to make things, and it's kind of a thing. And at the last startup that I was at, also a ticketing startup in the Bay Area, it was painful to recruit engineers. And so I spent a lot of time recruiting engineers. You can either 100%, you can improve your own performance 100% or hire 5 amazing people. And like the 5 hires is always going to dwarf your own contributions. And so I realized I thought a lot of startups were just like, they were screwing the process of hiring people and creating all these weird expectations. And so it creates massive engineering bottlenecks for a lot of startups. And so I realized I was really good at recruiting engineers. So I was like, I want to recruit engineers that want to work the way that I want to work. And I'm pretty certain that once I recruit those engineers, we can do massive feats of engineering and not have to like spend $1 million doing it. And so I've recruited engineers. Mostly, I have a whole group of people from Brazil that are amazing. They answered my angel list posts, some designers, and we're just like very balanced product engineers, you know, business thinking, a lot of design thinking, because there's a lot of design thinking that goes into the prototyping process, right? A lot of engineers maybe don't take ownership of the design process. And I would really encourage people to like read Don Norman books, right? The Design of Everyday Things is like a prophetic book in terms of understanding technology. And I read it once a long time ago, and then I read it once like a year and a half ago, and it was like, wow, facepalm, like, you know, massive understandings. And anyways, we just try to be a very balanced product engineering shop that focuses on sort of early stage entrepreneurship.
Cool. Kind of a slant rhyme off that. Is anyone here looking for a job? Cool. So just FYI, so is anyone here hiring at their company? Okay, we got two. I also know Uptech is hiring. Akira's company is hiring, and someone else just posted in the jobs channel, Miller Knoll, aka Herman Miller, is on a developer hiring spree. So for the people who are here,
I think the internet is on a hiring spree right
a
now.
couple people here who are hiring developers. I know some people who are hiring developers. Come talk to me, and then.
I think of as Startup Landia. We're like people assisting other people and machines in producing these little artifacts.
Quite. All right. Let's see. That's good. All right. So I made a little web app and also a PowerPoint to go with this. It's about it is about let's see, how do we enable this? Wait. All right, let me figure out why this isn't enabled. It's kind of weird. All right, I think Ubuntu crashed. So we'll be back. Oh, here it is. Sorry. Okay, cool. So this talk is about extractive question answering. I made a little web app where you can type in questions, and then it will give you the highlighted text for, within the context of, yeah.
That's a real question.
It is a real question. Weirdly enough, North Korea owes Finland a bunch of money because they told them they would pay for a bunch of paper mill machinery in the 1960s. They never did. So yeah, just random fact. Anyway, so I'll show you the web app first. Everything's breaking. Okay, close your eyes. Don't look. Yeah, all right. Cool. So this is about a quick extractive question answering in 2021. So the first thing you need to do if you're building a web app and you have a bunch of context, basically, or you have a corpus and you want somebody to be able to ask questions and answer the questions about it, like you have a little search engine, is you want to be able to classify their query. So you want to know if it's a statement, a keyword search, or a question. And so there's a bunch of ways to do this. You can search for, WH words, when, why, what, that kind of thing at the beginning. But then that kind of breaks down. You start to get the questions like, Finland owes money North Korea, doesn't it? And things like that. So you start to want to use something that's a little bit more, heavier and sort of better at doing that than just a normal sort of, which localhost is it? Sorry. I think it's 550. Oh, it's not 550. That's not that one. Which localhost is it? Oh, wait. There it is. Okay, cool. So you want to be able to, so I have like 5,000 company summaries loaded into this from like a database I have. So you can sort of ask it questions. I'll show this off first, like which companies were founded in the 1800s. And so it kind of tells you, it will highlight the answers, this one was founded in, 1876, whatever, that kind of stuff. Very fancy indeed, yeah. But yeah. So let's go back to our classifying thing. And so the only model that I'm going to use in this entire thing is something called BERT, which is based on a paper that came out in 2017 by Google called Attention is All You Need. And basically they took the entire Wikipedia corpus and a bunch of other stuff and they masked words in it and then had these, stacked transformers that tried to predict the word that is masked. And so anyway, I'm not going to explain the specifics. I'm not an expert, but it's really easy to use with a lot of libraries. And you can train it for a lot of downstream tasks. So one of those downstream tasks is classification. So you can give it a bunch of statements, give them the label of statement, take a bunch of keywords, give them the classification of keyword and a bunch of questions, and the classification is question. And you can sort of train it downstream by outputting a vector that is based on the label that that it is. So you could train it on a huge data set of questions and be like, these are all questions, etc. Another thing you can do with BERT is you can, instead of giving it a single labeling classification vector, you can have a label that's too long, as in two, and then you can say sort of like, hey, here's this question, encode it into this long vector, and then give me a two-length output that is the beginning of the answer and the end of the answer inside a context. And so you can do that, and so that's what we're going to get to later as far as the question answering part. So if you were to just use the off-the-shelf question answering BERT from the Transformers library or whatever, you could just feed in your corpus. You could take your question answering BERT and you could say like, hey, is this the end or the beginning of the answer to the question for each paragraph you have. And then throughout that, you get a positive, you get a confidence rating, and then you could just, rank it by the highest confidence, the lowest confidence, and that would take forever. That would take a really long time because it's a pretty big model, and it would not be, fun to load that way. So we'll get to our DPR BERT. So Facebook came out with this paper in 2020, and basically. So, sorry, before I get to that, you can do it a couple ways. You could try to rank or try to guess which passages had your question answer in them beforehand with something like BM25 or TF-IDF. Basically, that just ranks like the lexical overlap. So it's like if you have the word, bees in your, answers, then it's like, oh, it's going to grab that paragraph and then feed the answer. Or feed it through the the question answering model, that kind of thing. That breaks down a little bit, and but anyway, Facebook AI came out with this deep passage retrieval BERT model in 2020, and it's about 20% better than that, and it isn't that slow. So yeah. So what you can do is you can basically take two different BERT models, one for passage encoding and one for question encoding, and then you train them both to try to make a vector space where the question is nearest the answer. And so in doing that, instead of doing this when someone asks a question, you can just encode all of your passages beforehand, save them in your database, and then whenever you ask a question, you just encode that and then search for its nearest neighbor. So yeah, that's what Facebook came out with. Sorry if I'm explaining this terribly. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I don't know, maybe I missed this, but like, what is the, like, where is the use case of this? Is this like is this BERT system a real thing? Is there a...
Oh yeah, so this is how you just do question answering. So you could ask like, where is Tesla, or Tesla, headquarters. Then it's like, oh, Palo Alto, California.
Oh, no, I like it.
Yeah.
So is there a real, did you like create a website for this, or you're just running this locally right now?
I'm running this locally. There is a web domain. Yeah.
That you created?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Where are you, like, where is all this info coming from?
This is all just in the database.
Like, where did that come from though?
It comes from like an API or like Yahoo's Finance. These are only company summaries. So it's
just like crawling the internet for all this data?
No. It's like an API you can grab. You can grab Yahoo Finance's free company summaries. It's actually arbitrary for the text you load into it. So you could literally take any text you have and you could write a little script to put it in the database in this format. And like the processing script is disgusting, but
can you actually answer the question but why does someone create an oath and then money?
No, you can't, because I don't have that information actually in my database. But
Is
that would
anyone
be
using this on a large scale? Does
so-
implemented this like?
So yeah, this is sort of the way that you would build a question. If you were a big company, you had a bunch of textual data, and you wanted to build a question answering system, this is probably how you do it. The one thing that you would do besides this is you would index searches and save them, so that each time that somebody searched something, you could just use the cached version, and you wouldn't have to run it through the pipeline.
Do you know if anyone's using this like this
Specifically,
right now?
I mean, I'm sure Facebook uses a version of it in some way, and I'm sure Google uses a version of it as well. So, yeah, well, a very different version, I imagine, but they use some type of transformers to do some type of deep passage retrieval, and yeah. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of open source like libraries at this point that allow you to implement this pretty easily, and I have some links to some in the last slide. But anyway, so when you are implementing this thing, you would encode all of your encodings into your database beforehand, and then go ahead and throw them in your database so that you can use a similarity search to do it instead of doing it on the fly. So after you do that, you have your vector similarity engine, which is another Facebook project called FAISS. I imagine that stands for Facebook AI Similarity Search, but doesn't actually say anywhere. And then, so yeah. Then at the very end of it, you have your query, your classifier, your deep passage retrieval encoder, which pulls, goes into the vector similarity search engine, looks in your DB with those IDs that it returned, and then returns the documents that are relevant, and then you pass that through your question, answer model, and then you get your start and endpoints for your document stuff. Another interesting thing you can do is if you are just searching on statements, and you could, skip the deep passage retrieval part, and you could just encode your statement and then see which other statements were nearest it, and then return those if it wasn't a real question. So you could use Hugging Face Transformers makes this incredibly easy to implement. They have like a ton of models. And so if you're interested in natural language processing at all, they have a lot of very fun stuff to use. These are all, different models that you can run. Haystack is sort of where is an implementation of Hugging Face Transformers. And it's like basically where I got a lot of these ideas, and yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. And then FISS, which is a C++ library that Facebook invented. And then if you want to see how long this type of stuff took, so it took me 19 seconds to pull down all the articles off my database. It took me 0.9 seconds on this computer to put them in the similarity search indexing guy. And then, it takes 0.02 seconds for it to decide it's a question as opposed to a statement or a query. So, we can always play around with it if we want. So I don't know. Do you guys have any good questions?
This is all from Yahoo Finance.
This is actually from an API called Financial Modeling Prep, which is just descriptions, but it's not for commercial use or anything. So, which is one of the reasons why I'm just running it locally. I don't know.
What's the best stock to buy this year?
Yeah, so that won't work because it's not contextual; it's just summaries. So if there was some text inside my database that said the best stock to buy this year is, fresh Del Monte produce, then it would answer that question.
So this is 100% NLP, like it just will process
the context, exactly what you have in the database. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the only context it has.
Can you adjust this model for additional context?
Yeah. So you can, the amount of text you have in it is arbitrary. The amount of the text you have in it is arbitrary completely. So you could put whatever you wanted. So you could put, a textbook in this. You could put your help docs in this. You could put, all of your articles that you have written on your website help to do stuff in this,
You'd think like Alcohol or some crap would try to help you with this.
Yeah.
But they don't.
Yeah, but I mean, this is, And then the next step, would be you can do stuff like you can create a generative model that, generates questions based on texts. And then you can throw that into your users whenever you can be like, hey, do you want to search this, or that? And it can be generated text based on what the answers are in the help docs or whatever,
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I kind of made this for fun. I'm kind of making this into like an annotation platform so you can go through and select sentences and that kind of thing, and then, feed them into a sequence classifier or something like that.
And so this sequences your results, your returns based on most exact matches versus and it becomes less matched as it goes down the list.
Yeah. So this is just most likely, and I'm returning the top 3. So, if I wanted to, because it was fast, but
so you can return the top 50 and then exact matches.
Exactly. Or maybe I could return the least likely 3, which would be more fun. But I could return the top 100 and see how long that takes. That is, I don't know if this reloads, but. Well, the issue is it doesn't reload because I'm a bad developer, but I don't know. It'll take a second to load because it has to pull down all the articles and then put them in the thing. It'll take 20 seconds. Yeah. All right. Just watch it. Everyone be quiet. Yeah. What else was I gonna say?
So honestly, was this just for fun?
Sort of, yeah. This guy wanted me to make like this, like some NLP stuff surrounding, he's making like an ETF searcher website, and he was like, hey, and I was like, yeah, I might be interested in making something that's like sort of adjacent to this, and then I don't know. He kept like asking for more features and stuff, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I'll just keep this for fun, and maybe release it open source. And now I'm deciding to make it into like sort of an annotation platform, so you can go through, click on a bunch of sentences, and then whenever you add a new article to it, it'll just say, oh, these sentences are like the ones you clicked on earlier, or whatever.
When you publish your annotation platform, make sure you put it in the Slack channel.
I will. Yeah. So this is going to take a while. This is going to be, like, okay, it's question.
The Brave browser.
Oh, I don't know. It's got like an okay ad blocker, but like it's really no different than Chromium. It's not like I'm like really that excited about it. I just have it now. I don't know. Oh, so that didn't take as long as I expected. So what did I ask? Which companies make apple juice? So at this point, Vector Ventures in Boca Raton, well, they're close. There's actually Apple in this one. Let's see. Let's go down. Let's see if we can get a bad one. Treehouse Foods. Are they apple juice too? No, it looks like we're pickles, Mexican barbecue. I don't know.
Is that juice in there?
I don't even see any juice. Yeah, these are. Let's see.
That's pretty good to have something that is like close enough that you're making
juicy courtier. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. At this point, it's just like beverage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so did you build in? I mean, like So how does it take juice and turn that into beverage on the lower levels?
So that is something. So yeah, there. Let's. So
I mean, there's built-in context there, right?
yeah. So if you look at this like little bottom left area, BERT is a bidirectional encoder like stacks, which they're pretty complicated. And there is a good paper called, or not a paper, but like an explainer called, I forget, sorry. Anyway, so they went through the entire Wikipedia corpus, they made these sentences, and then they added a mask word to it. And when you add the mask word, it's basically they trained it, these encoders that have like a fine-tuning function that to guess what the mask word is. And so they learn the context of both the left and the right word, which, so it's like, I like, again.
Super complicated.
Yes, it's pretty complicated. I don't know enough about it to explain it in like layman's terms, you know? But anyway, it produces these hidden states that are like 768 vectors long, and they just pass them through encoders. Gotcha. And then basically it records like the context of these, you know, words in their place. So it works for semantic search, it works for sequence classification, it works for question answering, it works for a ton of stuff. And
Gotcha.
yeah.
So for word embeddings, king is to queen as man is to,
Thank you, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Woman. So then it can figure out, okay, woman is related to man in the same way as king and queen.
Yeah.
And it can kind of,
So again, super complicated.
Yes, it's very extremely complicated.
But cool tool. All right, any other questions?
Did you check out Infinity?
Infinity?
Yeah, Hugging Face just this last 2 weeks did their Infinity solution, which reduces inference to less than 1 millisecond.
Oh no, I haven't. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I haven't seen it. I haven't really been following what they do, but yeah.
It's just a new solution they put out.
Yeah. I know they're releasing like all their auto NLP stuff, and yeah.
I was gonna ask if you did the Kaggle competition recently, the question answering for any.
No. I'm just like implementing the stuff, not like I'm not fine tuning anything or running any of that stuff. Yeah, I have fine tuned stuff in the past for like semantic similarity, but I haven't done a lot, so.
No, it was really cool. I didn't expect that, like between Roberta and Bert, that TD and IDF would be more performant than some of these more like super class models. Yeah, so I'm using Bert Tiny, Bert Tiny 5 for the actual question answering part. And then, like just to show you guys, if you wanted to use a new model, so I know Python hurts your eyes, but if you wanted to use a new model, like a bigger model like this one, then you just, add it to your, like, hey, use this thing line, and then you, run it, and it's like, oh, I need this. Oh, wait, I already have this in my cache, don't I? Damn it. Sorry. Anyway, it'll just download it. It shows you a nice little loading bar and everything. So you can go to the Hugging Face Model Hub, and there's, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different fine-tuned, learning models for all types of stuff, translation, sentence similarity, question answering, summarization, all this stuff. If you're ever interested in this kind of thing, So, yeah, that's it.
So cool. Yeah. gonna run through a speed test essentially of a Cloudflare worker, and just something we can all kind of check out. So hopefully we can get this going as kind of a cool idea in the future. But all right, Chris, I put a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be perfect, but a Cloudflare worker is like a Lambda. It's a cloud function. You get a URL for it, you hit it, it runs some code, you get some shit back, hopefully, right? So Cloudflare, it's not like, I feel like it's not as obtuse as like the AWS console or everything, making a new Lambda. I know there's lots of tools that help it, but in Cloudflare, just in the dashboard, you're just like, I'm going to create a worker. Okay, here it is, you know, and it gives you a little GUI kind of thing for it. You can actually deploy it from your, you know, with CLIs and stuff too. You don't have to use this, but whatever. So we're going to call this like speed run. Rock and roll. So it gave me a URL for it. I have to deploy it once in order to get it. Not much code here, but let me just grab it and I'll new tab it. Nothing here yet. Cloudflare, you're never this slow. Oh, did it just finish? It's gonna screw up the whole thing if you can't be fast. Oh, I didn't save it. Like my cursor's still up there. Right?
Alright, so
Return.
Cloudflare sucks.
I'm gonna refresh. Speed run, deploy now. I just wanna see it work. Oh, there it goes. Wow, a little caching, a little fast. Hopefully it'll be faster from then. But see what it's returning? It's just returning some little splash page thing, but it's returning that because that's what their little default thing does. You know, let's like clean it up so you can kind of see what's going on. I don't really care about this crap just yet, but this is kind of interesting. It's parsing a URL right quick. Is this small enough for the string? Can I command plus it a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You want to throw some like general path in there and just like throw some cool.
Yeah. Well, what's our website? I don't even know if it responds anymore. Yeah. All right. Sweet. So preview. Oh, is that right?
It should be. There you go. Are we not on HTTPS?
Paste. Oh, maybe it needs the slash. No way. That's not how the internet works, is it?
It's communicating with the server.
This is the worst. Oh, it's not trusted. Maybe it has some. You know what? I bet it is. It's a Netlify deploy from like 3 years ago, and it's just a dead certificate. All right.
We probably actually do need to update our certificate.
Look at. Okay. So if your website isn't a piece of crap, it will return a request from that. But it doesn't have to be that. Like I can return a new response. I don't have to return a website that's a fetch. I can return whatever I want. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, Chris.
Oops. Right? Fine. But it doesn't have to be a string either. We're gonna build like an API, right? So we're gonna JSON.stringify some crap like a counter, because counters are the best. We have a counter now. Const counter equals 0 or something. Will it know what it is outside of that context? Sure. So now we have an API. It returns 0. Wow. Wow. But so that's kind of useful because it could do math. It could calculate pi or some crap, right? But these run at the edge, so they're really fast. It's just a nice little API for running.
Can you show the speed on this?
The speed of it? Yeah, it's definitely like 0.0001 milliseconds or something.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
so
is
stupid.
there a way to like actually test it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to distract me while I'm trying to do a speed run, sure, we'll talk about it.
I mean, you calling it speed run? I want to see what the speed is.
Worker, here's a real worker, like my little proxy, which I'll talk about later. There's like, here, that did 1 million requests, and it ran on average in 0.6 milliseconds. So that's smoking, right? You can't slow these things down. They're nuts fast. Okay, so there's our little API, but what?
Who's using these workers in the real world?
Okay.
Oh, for everything at CodePen. We use them for everything.
I just realized we're staring at you all the
Dumb. Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Fixed it.
No.
Sorry, everybody watching streaming who's definitely not watching anymore. All right. So we built an API. I'm using the crap out of these at CodePen for real for all kinds of interesting crap. I could get into that in a minute, but we're speed running, so we're going to do this first. The other thing that workers have that's interesting is this thing called KV, which is key value storage. So it's really simple. It's not a relational database. It's just a dumb little thing here. We're going to call this like speed run counter. That's like the namespace for our key value pair. I'm just going to add one real quick, like counter, and it's going to be 0. So I'll add an entry, so now I can like query for that really quickly. One thing I have to do though is bind it to that particular worker right quick though. So what's that called? Speed run. It should be at the top here. I'll open that particular worker, go under settings, and bind it to variable name. Counters. Speed run counters though, right? Speed run counter. And then we got to name it. We'll just call it KV to make it real simple there. And then it's just kind of like available magically in here as KV. So instead of const counter, it would equal like, oh wait, KV dot get counter. So that's hopefully going to run okay. Run. It might take a second for that binding to go through. Oh, it needs to be like part of the handle request because it's not in an async function. Y'all know that? Oh, interesting, huh? That's cool. So let's see if we go into that counter and we were to just manually change it maybe. Like there's 100 on this counter. What the flip? Are you not a text area? Oh, you. Run. Oh, it's 100. That's a little funky that it's not a integer though, isn't it? Maybe we gotta like, JavaScript's the best. It feels like it should be an integer. I'm just like cleaning up after myself a little bit. Okay, fine. This is interesting though, like, so I have this request. This is the signature that you have to have for a Cloudflare worker. It's gonna fetch and it's gonna handle the request, and then I can do whatever I want when I handle the request, like get crap from my KV. It could pull stuff out of the URL. It could pull an identifier out of the URL and run a query on the get for that thing. I'm just hard coding counter, but it can do all kinds of fancy crap. You can have millions and millions of records in that KV store, and it still will return in just tiny milliseconds. Really cool. So here, I get the request URL, and let's say we make it like increment instead. So like, you know, we would hit the URL at this. And this is, you don't have to use that URL. You can actually map it to a URL on your own website. So I could have it mapped to like CSS/API or something, and it will run there instead of this, which is pretty cool. But like, let's say we do that, then we want it to, let's just kick the counter up if we increment it. So it's get and put, which is a little weird, but okay. We're gonna put whatever the counter is, +1. Okay, so if it was increment and then we hit return, not part, whoa. Is it not set? Maybe it is set. No, it's not.
Do you have to get like it as a string and then parse it and then add one?
Oh, maybe that's the problem, is it? You shouldn't have to do that, shouldn't you? Did I just format it wrong? Can you not just do that?
Yeah, I think it needs to be a string.
Counter as a string?
The put means it puts a string.
Really? So you have to stringify it before you put it back? No way. How do you stringify something? What if I, whatever, can I just, that will force it to be a string, won't it? Oh, it's, yeah, but you have to tell it what the key is, right? That's the problem. Okay.
There you go.
JavaScript kicks ass.
There you go.
That's weird though that it like.
That was a JavaScript is awesome.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right, that's kind of rad, right? So we have this URL. One's a getter and one's a putter. Really? Oh wow. But that's that. So I put up. I don't even care. So there's two things. We're gonna make a real web app now, like right in front of your eyes. So we'll do a fetch for a URL. The URL is gonna be our worker, and then it's gonna get some data. So let's see if it worked. Console.log data. I think it's gonna not work. Not because of that reason, but because of because cores, right? Everybody's favorite cores. I just saved out a little thing here right quick. You can just have headers. Bang. Like let's say, you need to manipulate the headers. I could put a jot in here if I wanted to. I super don't want to though. But I'm gonna, when I return this JSON stringify thing, I can comma separate and just put in the cores headers to, I think I have to go like headers, cores headers though. Is it still happy? Yeah, save and deploy, fine. Now if I run this sucker, I think, yeah, look. Oh my gosh. And you know where that data is? It's like in Australia. There's probably a data center in Greenland. I don't know, but it's at the edge. That's amazing. That data is, as soon as I click that stupid increment button or run this, it propagates to everywhere. So that's how it retains so fast. That KV storage is just really cool, So there's the data, and then I want to do something with it. I love this about JavaScript. If something has an ID in the DOM, you don't even have to query selector for it. You can just go like, oh, it has an ID, then it just is window.that anyway. So inner HTML equals.
Wait, so output.inner HTML is grabbing the ID, not the.
It's the same thing as doing like document.query selector. I know, but it has an ID too. Of itself.
No, I know.
Kyle. Just for Kyle dot. Isn't that blow your mind? Look at that! So now if there's a clicker, yeah, isn't that weird? So here's button, so button, if you click it, then it calls the URL, but it adds the increment too, and then we're gonna do the same thing. We'll just set the inner HTML to the counter. I don't know why, but it's not going to work. Oh, it does work. Oh my God. Speed run. And that, again, that's already in Australia. I don't know how, but that number 120 is already propagated to some data center over there. It really is. It's smoking fast. So that's the whole thing. I think workers are cool. We have a one value KV store. It can be millions, trillions long. It's amazing how long it can be. And that's just one use of a worker. A worker can perform 5 fetches and stitch crap together and return it. They have little fancy APIs for manipulating HTML. You want to run an A/B test? Fetch the HTML, mess with it, return that. 50-50, a split on some HTML. Super cool. You can, how in the beginning I had to go get CSS tricks and return it. One cool thing is I was doing this the other day. So I wanted to get really accurate, unblockable analytics. So you have Google Analytics on your site. I read an article that's like all nerds block Google. It was like 58% of nerds block Google because you have some crap like Brave or I use Ghostery that blocks a bunch of crap. So the web is faster, right? Well, fuck you. I don't want you to block my stuff. I need analytics. So there's this analytics site that I started using, and it's like, of course, it's like, put this third-party JavaScript on your website. So, well, no, I don't want to link to plausible IO. I'll just proxy it and have it return from csstricks.com/analytics.js. And it will just proxy that little piece of JavaScript from then and run it like it looks like it's first-party JavaScript. Clever, 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 right?
And you do that through Cloudflare?
Yeah, your response of your worker is just a fetch for that third-party JavaScript. It turns out it's slightly more complicated with analytics because there's some cookies and headers and shit it wants to pass along properly and stuff. So it's 8 lines of code instead of 2, It's not a big deal. Anyway, that was a little speed run on workers. I think they are really way cool. They're a little you can't I didn't have to pull in Express to deal with this routing crap. I didn't have to like pull in Axios or some fetch library, because this is V8 JavaScript. It's not Node, it's like Chrome running in the cloud, you know? It's kind of rad. But it's like not wicked powerful, you know? They have to run super fast, kind of like a Lambda. You can't have something run for 15 minutes in a worker. It's just not going to happen, you know? I can't pull in Puppeteer to take a screenshot or whatever. It's not going to happen, you know? There are some like resource limits on it, but I like this little thing too, how they like jack in dev tools right in the browser. That's pretty cool. So you can console.log stuff and like debug yourself as you're working on the thing. And you can run this all locally too. So if it's like you can't, you need to be working locally, they have this thing called MiniFlare that spins it all up locally, and you have the same kind of crap to work on it. So pretty powerful, cooler than Lambda, I think, but just like maybe a little less robust, but quicker and at the edge and cheaper and all that stuff. So I'll stop with that. Cheers, speed run, high five forever. And I guess that's the end of BendJS. I did hear from that Carter dude have you heard of Cascadia.js? Yeah, they were gonna come and then COVID and didn't, and now they're having a Cascadia.js nowish, or I think it just wrapped. He told me they signed the contract for Sun River in October 2022. So
it was supposed to be in Sun River 2020, and then obviously they didn't.
So it feels like news, feels like shareable in this room kind of thing. And I'm gonna end the stream. Cool?
Cool.